My father first talked to me about it fairly early. He said, "What do you think of ThunderCats?" And I said, "ThunderCats? What is a ThunderCat?" And the first thing I remember him telling me was, I had this idea for a series that involved superhumans that had the form of cats, what parts of them were going to be animal, what parts of them were going to be human. And he would put that down when he pitched it. And it was kind of like I say, ThunderCats, ThunderCats, ThunderCats. And after a while, it really started saying, yeah.
Rankin Bass was an animation studio that had pioneered stop-motion animation for television. They became kind of the masters of that. And then they diversified. They got into doing cell animation as well.
At that time in the Rankin Bass career, we had just formed an affiliation with Telepictures. And their strong point, and the reason they wanted us and we wanted them, is they had a great sales force.
So Arthur and Jules developed a relationship with them, and in the process of developing other shows, we were being pitched ideas by Leisure Concepts, Inc., this design firm. They would come up with ideas and present them, and I remember Stan Weston came up, and I forget exactly what he was pitching to us, but I obviously wasn't too interested in that. I looked over at his portfolio, and there was this design in there of this half cat, half human thing. It was just this incredible piece of artwork. And so I sort of wandered over and took it out of his portfolio. I remember Jules looking at it, and you could just see his mind just off to the races. In New York at the time, Rankin Bass was the only animation company. So we didn't have a pool of writers or illustrators that worked specifically for animation.
They got to use a lot of people who didn't work on the regular Hollywood cartoons. They got people like Leonard Starr, who was a great cartoonist, a newspaper cartoonist, and they've also got people like Howard Post and Bob Haney, who had written comic books for DC. ThunderCats was done with an American comic book sensibility, and it really comes through with the kind of stories and the imagination on that show.
Jules called me and asked if I could come in to Rankin Bass's office. Everybody was gone. Jules was there alone, and he had an easel set up with some posters of cat people. There was the Panther Man and the Tiger Man, that sort of thing. There was also, what turned out to be the Thunder Tank. The best thing about it was the logo, the lettering on the logo was just sensational. So he said, "Can you do a treatment?" So I said, when do you want it? And he says, "Tomorrow." And that's what I did. It was a 12-page treatment, the entire thing, the exodus from Thundera and the dying planet and being attacked by the mutants.
Jules, in the very beginning, said to me, what you have to understand about animation is that whatever you can imagine, whatever you want, you can do. You just have to write it.
We were a bunch of guys sitting around a conference room table saying, okay, well, they're in this new place called Third Earth. They're going to have to move around. We got to have this thing called a Thunder Tank. And then, okay, well, they can't just go to the gas station. So we have to invent this thing called Thundrillium that the Thunder Tank runs on. And they can't find it.
So what you must do is open your mind to anything. So it never occurred to me that, we couldn't have an Egyptian character with a spaceship. Why couldn't we have Thunder Tanks? As long as you could somehow fit it within that format.
Just getting everyone around the conference table for 2-3 long day sessions and just kicking ideas around.
ThunderCats Ho!
I had ThunderCats Ho, and Jules added the thunder building on it. You could accelerate it. Thunder. It's musical. That was good. Jules had a touch for that.
It was collective. It was. But I must say, Jules Bass was running the collective.
The vision of the show that Jules had was a very clear, clean action-adventure show with a very clearly defined comedy element. I think he had very clear visions for each of the characters and very clear roles for young kids like Wile E. Cat and Wile E. Kid.
First light. I remember there was no question there was going to be a good guy girl, and so we created Chitara. And of course there were a lot of jokes to me. At first they didn't want to give her a weapon. They wanted to put her in the Lair's kitchen, and thank God they were joking.
She tried to make Chitara, a strong female presence on the show, and of course most of the writers were male, and didn't respond very well to that. Well, he gave her a stick. What else do you want?
Oh, I loved Chitara. I think I identify with her. I just loved her strength. I loved the fact that she was strong. It was partially physical, but partially was her speed.
Chitara was just fast, you know. I mean, her whole point was speed. And Panthers was strength, and Tigra's was integrity and sort of leadership, and Lionel was a learning experience. He's just learning to be a superhero throughout the things.
I think the idea was to give the audience a model, somebody that the audience could identify with, like an older brother who has to go through the process of growing up.
Ancient spirits of evil, transform this decayed form to Mumra.
He just was a bad guy that got mummified, possibly a bad high priest, but there was no backstory. He was just there as a villain. I named him Mumra, and he was evil, and it was very much like the Boris Karloff mummy, you know, walking around like that. But Jules made him the monster. And there was a lot of transformation going on at that time. You know, cars would turn into big robots and that sort of thing. And so transformation seemed like a good idea.
There had been many parents groups that had been campaigning against cartoons on television. They were considered too violent for kids.
The ThunderCats, we had another idea, which had not been done then. And with all of the action going on, there was always a moral to the story that was, if you will, sugar-coated and hidden in there for kids to observe. And we had Robert Cusis, a child psychologist, who advised us on that.
Children's TV is going to go on. If we're going to produce it, let's bring someone on and who's going to do something positive for kids. My job as a consultant was really to review scripts to make sure that the content was not going to be harmful. And then the idea emerged to write morals.
He would look at our outlines. He would then decide, okay, this story is definitely going to adapt itself very well to lessons in responsibility. And we would then meet with the writer and discuss on the second draft how we could expand that.
I let him get to me, and until I can control that, I've got a long way to go.
Lionel and his development is something kids could identify with. The fact that he was learning just as they're learning. And then I think of Jaga, the wise old man who was a parent figure, someone he could rely on to go to seek wisdom.
You've always been my guide and teacher, Jaga, and my friend.
I think that gave children then watching it a sense of safety, that there were elders in their life, so to speak, that they could rely on their wisdom to learn.
I wish he'd joined us in our struggle to spread the code of Thundera. Justice,
truth,
honor,
and loyalty.
We thought all of our shows had good guidance and advice for our audience, and especially young children. In everything we did, we tried to show that this is the way to grow up and become a real person. But the message never dominated the storytelling itself. And yes, it was good for the stations to be able to point out that they were doing public service work along with their adventure programming.
Sword of Omens, come to my hand. Sword of Omens, come to my hand.
Those volcanic eruptions are creating a magnetic field
that's destroying our communications. What are we going to do, Lionel? Shall we have children?
We had the freedom to create these characters any way the director would let us, basically, and do whatever sounds and give whatever expression we could.
And Lee Donecker was in charge of all of the actors and directed and produced most of the voice recordings. And we created this stock company of a dozen actors that would come and do their parts on a regular basis.
Larry Kinney was one of our first hires as Lionel. There was just no question. He could be the American superhero.
The first thing I thought to myself was, I don't want to play him like a superhero, because that's the first thing, you know, I'm Lionel, and you're. But they kept saying to me, well, we want a strong superhero voice. So I just basically tried to make him vulnerable and yet strong, you know.
Lionel was the youngster. And so it was somewhat about the more mature characters like Tigra giving him guidance as we went. We had to settle on how these characters not only were going to sound, but what their attitudes were going to be. I wanted Tigra to be a real guy, a man's man. And so he would help Lion-O develop into maturity. So, and sometimes when I listen to Tigra, I say, boy, this is a square dude, kind of, you know?
Panthro was my favorite character in the show, and Earl Hyman voiced him. He had a delicious multi-level quality of his voice was very beautiful and melodious and rich.
You are a genius. I am? The ventilation shaft, Snarf. You could squeeze through to the sword chamber.
Earl Hyman is a fine Shakespearean actor. He speaks several Scandinavian languages and made a long career playing Othello in Scandinavia.
Hadn't you better slither back to your castle, Plundar, mutant?
Lynn Lipton in the studio helped in creating her voice. I think hit just the right pitch.
She had to have a voice that was feminine, though strong enough to carry Lion-O. So you had to pitch her, you know, we are going to do this, Lion-O. And, you know, you had to pitch her so that she had such a remarkable sense of strength and yet motherly. And some of the guys have said to me that I was their fantasy growing up. And I mean, I'm kind of flattered.
Now, Mumra is this 80-foot tall guy, and remember that mucus coming out of his mouth and stuff? That was Earl. It wasn't mucus, but whenever he had to do the line, ancient spirits of evil, transform this decayed form into, and then we'd all back away in the corner, Mumra! It'd be all over the room.
I don't know if anybody expected Earl to come up with the Mumra he created. It was so outrageous. Sometimes we just stand and watch him do these speeches, and he'd go into that fiendish laugh, and we just applaud. We just applaud after he was finished.